there's one thing you can count on me to have on hand, it is copious amounts of warble.
This video is sponsored by Melanote. For some strange, compulsive reason, it has become my mission this year to create every kind of themed corset you can think of. Trees, dragons, dragonflies, trees again, Versailles? Nothing is safe. But I haven't yet made the most obvious corset to match my preferences for dark colors and gothic fashion sense, a vampire corset. So all the way back in like March, I did a spring fantasy nonsense clothing design video, and as they always do, a couple of spookier designs snuck in, including a vampire-inspired version of the porcelain Corset Armor sets I have been making as of late, and now that it's a little bit more seasonally appropriate, I am finally going to make this design. So as you could probably imagine, there are a ton of steps to this process, and some of the things I'm doing in this video are things that I'm doing for the first time. I'm gonna try to sculpt some of the little details myself, and I will also be trying to use UV resin for the first time. No idea how that's going to go. So I need to get the general assembly stuff out of the way super quick, so let's get patterning. Whenever I pattern out these armor corsets, it's very much a Frankensteining process of drafting pieces with measurements, trying them on my body, and cutting them to size. But luckily, this time I have some pre-made patterns from other projects, so I based a lot of this on those. I used the cut pattern from Daria Pattern Making's Rose Cafe dress, and most of the bodice is from my Valentine's Day dress. Of course, it wouldn't be a video for me without at least some winging it and eyeballing measurements for no reason. So I used a bit of my usual Mary Shelley antics as well, and I mean, 'tis the season, why not? That is only for the corset though. Whenever it came to the other pieces, my methods consisted of pure chaos, and by that I mean using an Apple pencil box as a straight edge and sketching out my hip armor shapes with minimal measurements. Like, when I say I just drew out some shapes and hoped for the best, I mean it. But I wasn't so impulsive with the pattern making of the shoulder piece and wrapped myself in saran wrap and masking tape like a leftover pumpkin bread so that I could attempt to sketch an approximate pattern. This is really hard to do when you're house sitting completely alone with no extra pairs of hands, but I think I figured it out. And this time the color doesn't poke me in the face like the dragon corset one did.
Wow. I
also figured out the bracer and cuff pieces off camera, but they're just super simple shapes, here they are. And I decided that my corset didn't look nearly enough like a saber-toothed tiger, so I added a couple of fangs. So now that I had a full pattern set, it's time to cut these out.
We have to weigh this warbler down somehow. This is gonna take forever. That is all of my warbler. Just kidding. If there's one thing you can count on me to have on hand, it is copious amounts of warble.
I love a good granite countertop.
Corset base complete.
If you noticed by how the pattern came out, I did change a couple of things about the design from my original concept image. I did want to make it look a little bit more vampire forward.
I can't help being a gorgeous fiend.
So at this point, I do really like the design, but at the same time, it does feel a little incomplete and not specific enough, and it has been like 5 months since I did the design. So I just wanted to brainstorm this idea a little bit more, and I did that using this video's sponsor, Melanote. Melanote is an all-in-one tool for planning and actually completing your creative projects. I began my nefarious plans with a template that provided a great overview of all of my project details. Here I could do a lot of the structural planning of the project by creating task and materials lists to keep me on track, and I even created a board for my daily schedule to prevent me from getting behind, which is a very important step. I could also create a mood board folder that allowed me to fully flesh out all the different ideas I had for the design in one place, and I could also create a board for research and references for the various new techniques I'd be using. And to fully illustrate my thoughts, I can add a variety of media and references, including images, color swatches, links to products or sources, video tutorials, and add notes and arrows to really clarify my ideas. I usually have several computer folders, documents, and Pinterest boards for a project like this, so I really like how Milanote allows you to have everything in one place so that I don't get too scatterbrained. But I still like a little bit of fluidity and chaos in my planning process, so my favorite feature is probably the pen tool that allows you to draw over and annotate images in your own handwriting in a really natural way. I also tend to work alone a lot right now, but I do want to change that with some future CosTube collaborations. And for those projects, Milanote allows you to have other collaborators on your board so you can share ideas, invite others to leave feedback, and even workshop ideas in real time. So if you also have an overly ambitious project that could use a little organization, Milanote is free to use with no time limit. You can sign up with my link below for free and get creating. Anyways, thanks to Milanote for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. Alright, so now we are on to sculpting, which is a step that makes me super nervous because I'm gonna try to do some of the sculpting stuff myself. So if you've noticed from the last couple of my videos, I have been on a bit of a sculpting kick recently, and whenever I decorate these corsets, I normally do that by using my little hot glue silicone mold hack. It's exactly what it sounds like. I put hot glue in a filigree silicone mold and I get a pretty little shape out of it. And I do want to upgrade in the future to using some other material like maybe resin. I've never done that before and I don't know how to do that. That can also get very expensive very fast. Listen, I'm not working with a Heisenberg level budget here. Until then, this is my only method. I did go earlier today and make a whole bunch of these because even though this is a quick method, I do have to spend some time building up a collection so that I have a stock and I'm not just sitting there waiting for glue to dry. But that makes for a very uniform look across all of these kind of fancy armor corsets that I've made, and that's not what I'm going for. I want it to be giving ancient ornate masterpiece that may or may not have some kind of cursed spell attached to it. If you saw my inspo boards from earlier, I really want it to be giving Gothic architecture, cathedrals, filigree, but more of that like sharp shaped filigree. Also want to bring in some very distinctive vampire motifs, like maybe bat wings, definitely some like teeth shapes, some spikes. And I also want to learn how to be able to sculpt filigree because I do want to learn how to make my own and then fabricate silicone molds so that I can use them over and over again. I am just someone who's on a personal journey of trying to learn how to do literally every single artistic thing under the sun. So this is just another one of those things, but you know, baby steps. I don't think I'm going to be able to accomplish anywhere near this level of detail. I'm gonna try my darndest. I have some clear Worbla that might allow us to make some little stained glass window looking things in here, so I'm just going to have at it and see where my sculpting takes me. Mostly because I don't really know what I'm doing, but when do I ever? Let's see how this goes. Why are you doing this? Hello, I just wanted to give a quick update. Sculpting is going pretty poorly. I'm actually so frustrated right now because the materials that I have used before and have worked for me just fine before are kind of failing me right now. Hey, foam clay. Why are you doing this to me? I'm making it work. So far, Worbla has been the most effective material. So I've been trying to alternate between rolling out little worms of that and rolling out little worms of foam clay, which would be fine, except whenever I put the foam clay onto my Worbla, it doesn't stay. I'll add a little bit of hot glue to help it stay. And lo and behold, it still doesn't stay. What is going on? Seriously, I have done this before and it sticks and it's fine. Can the crafting gods stop being against me today? Because I'm starting to think they don't like me. Since when have you guys not liked me? What did I do? I'm finally at that age where I would like to have teeth on my shoes. This is probably the weirdest thing that I've ever made. I sent a picture of this to my friend, and this is what she replied back. I already broke this mirror and made it look absolutely ridiculous. Let's do the same thing to some poor unsuspecting lamp. Is this just the result of me not planning very well again? I'm gonna go with no. I have scientific proof of these methods working for me before. I think my recent adventures in like actual polymer clay sculpting have maybe set my expectations of my own skills too high. I was doing that and I was like, oh, this is great. I can handle this. It's killing my spirit a little bit because I have an artistic vision, you guys. I would just need the right materials to be able to get it just right. And, okay. You know what? Sometimes you try really hard to do something and it just doesn't work out the way you want it to. I'm reminded of that song.
Sometimes I try to do things and it just doesn't work out the way I want it to.
I think I'm just going to make do with Warbler.
2 hours later.
Hi, so scratch all of that. I didn't really see a way around this problem, so to save my week, I just went to the craft store to see if there was an alternative that I could find. What I found was Nara flower clay, which is something that I have never heard of in my entire life. It's supposedly what people use whenever they sculpt flowers, and it's supposed to be really flexible when it dries, and it air dries. So I feel like this is actually not bad for having to call an audible. I have already taken it out and tested it. It has a really interesting consistency to it. It's kind of like a paper clay, kind of like a polymer clay. I don't know, it dries really smooth. It actually seems kind of promising. Let's see how it does.
First step is rolling out a stupid worm. Then you lay the worm gingerly across the booby cup. You repeat those steps on the other booby cup. Continue laying worms across those sketch lines until the creator of this video stops being lazy and chooses to continue recording this voiceover herself.
Okay, fine. As you can probably already tell, this clay worked a lot better. It actually stuck to the Warbler, which is good. And I could roll it into much smaller strips and it held enough detail for me to do some sharper edges with. I definitely couldn't do detailed filigree. For that, I would probably need something like epoxy sculpt or something that has a longer working time and higher density, but it worked alright for my purposes. It gave me that little extra bit of a customized design I was looking for, especially on the cups, and you'll learn later on that I definitely was not thrilled with the sculpt overall, but that was mostly due to the Warbler panel in the middle. It's not great. But it's time to move past all of that with some designs that I did not make. Observe as these detailed filigree glue shards that I had absolutely no role in creating make all of these pieces look 1,000 times better. Take note of how the middle school level crafting skill, squeezing out puddles of hot glue, takes this from a mediocre piece to something that might trick the unsuspecting viewer into thinking I possess significantly more talent than I actually do. That's right, folks, anyone can do what I'm doing right now, and I'm having an existential crisis regarding my job security. So let's move on to something that actually uses some of my expertise. I will see you guys tomorrow for painting. A lot of painting. This is what all of those pieces look like in the daylight after gluing. And to begin the painting process, I just primed them with a little bit of matte black spray paint. I went with matte this time to make sure all the layers of paint stick really well. Ooh, spooky. Hello. So hear me out. I can't explain it in any kind of sane way, but now that it's all painted up with this matte black, it kind of looks a little bit tasty. Like you could break this off, eat it like it's a bar of dark chocolate. So I am very excited now. The next step of this whole process is giving it all a base coat of red and other paint colors with my airbrush, which is over here. I've used my airbrush a couple of times so far, but this is my first time using it on an actual costuming project. And definitely my first time using it on any kind of armor. I'm excited to see what kind of gradients I get. It should also make this process infinitely faster than it normally is. I normally do this by hand, and it takes my entire life, and oh, I just hate every single second of it. Anyways, I was gonna get a deeper, more intense red, but my cheapskate side got the best of me. I think I can still mix up something that's pretty good. Swish, swish. That took all of 5 minutes, so let's do the other ones. And now it's time for what is quite possibly my favorite step of this entire process, which is detail painting. So on my previous armor projects like this, I've done a lot of like floral painting motifs. I'm thinking I do want to go for something similar on this, but again, I want to make it fit the theme a little bit better. I'm thinking maybe something a little bit more like this, more gothic influences, maybe like some blood droplet motifs. I have a pretty decent idea in my head of what I want to go for, so I think I'm just gonna scour Pinterest for some reference images and just wing it and figure it out. I'm also really excited about this step because for the first time on a project, I'm going to be experimenting with a little bit of UV resin. I think I'm going to use this to create kind of like a marbling stained glass look behind these like little window panels. I'm just gonna mess around by mixing some of this with acrylic paint and see what I get. So this bit was definitely a little tricky because I don't know if this is true of all UV resin, it probably is, but the kind I was using had a more difficult time curing when you mixed it with darker colors, and I wanted to use reds, blacks, and golds, so my first little test behind the window was pretty rough, so I just ended up doing the pour on the front instead. And this also proved to be tricky because whenever I was adding paint to marble it and it wasn't fully mixed, obviously the paint stayed wet even when the resin cured. So to fix that problem, I did add a clear layer over all of the marbling to fully seal that in, and the results are obviously crude for my first time, but I do quite enjoy the look of this anyways. It's not entirely smooth since I was pouring on something that was not a flat surface. I don't know how to avoid that because I don't think I can shape it after I do the UV resin. I'm sure I could fix that somehow in the future, but like I said, I still enjoy the result. But what I enjoyed even more was this painting process. I think this is some of the most fun that I've ever had painting a costume. I just really like all of the designs I was able to kind of come up with on the spot. This is also one of those steps that just really calms my inner chaotic energy. So whenever I'm in the middle of a stressful project, I get to just sit and paint details for a couple of hours. It is like the most relaxing, grounding thing for me. Usually I spray paint everything with a gold metallic base and define it with a dark wash later. Instead, this time I opted to paint the filigree black as a base and dry brush on a little rub and buff gold leaf, which gave it this super antique gold looking finish. It looks way more realistic than it normally does, so this is definitely the way to go. And thank you to all of the people suggesting on past armor corset videos that I try a dry brushing method instead, because you are absolutely right, it looks way better. Hello, and welcome to what is hopefully the final day of this project. Hopefully. I really only have finishing touches left. The reason why I'm apprehensive about my time frame at all is that I don't know if I like this. Like, it doesn't look bad. I don't hate it, but I think my limitations whenever it comes to sculpting intricate detail really kind of slapped me in the face this week. I would say the main part of this that I don't love is just this center panel here. It's giving worm. The other thing that I'm concerned about at this point is there not being a ton of contrast between the gold filigree and the red on the corset. There are two things that I think I'm going to do to improve the look of this. First of all, I think that I might just do a couple more layers of UV resin over the middle window and basically try to cover up all of the window details that I don't like. I'm also gonna put some gemstones there anyways, so I'm hoping between doing those things, it'll actually turn out kind of okay. The other thing that I think I'm going to do, maybe against my better judgment, go back in with my airbrush and just add a little bit more shading around all of the edges of the filigree to create a little bit more contrast. I did try to go in with a wash last night, but the finish on the airbrush paint that I have is glossy and it makes all of the detailed painting I have come off. It already happened here. I don't feel like dealing with that again. That will probably mean that I'll have to go back in with my rub and buff and add a little bit more gold leaf over all of the filigree, but that process takes like 5 to 10 minutes. I feel like it's probably worth it. Let's give this airbrushing thing a try. So to fix that, I did do a couple more layers of resin on my windows, and went in one more time with my airbrush, which was obviously a nerve-inducing step for me, but it actually added some much-needed gradation over my bright orange details and did a nice job separating the filigree from the red panels, and I liked it so much that I repeated it on all of the other pieces, and it made them look even better, and I didn't even have to go in to touch up much of the filigree because the airbrush was so precise, so look at me, being worried about nothing. Anyways, I was gonna try to do the clear coat on these with resin, but I was not confident enough in my skills for that yet, so I opted for this enamel finish that I used on my Sword and Shield project that gives everything a really similar finish to clear resin if you layer it up enough, and it definitely did the trick. But next is the part of the project where I'm literally doing 5 things at once for the next 5 hours straight because this baby needs to be finished up with gemstones, chains, beads, a capelet, and lacing, and that all takes forever. So it's time for a lightning round.
Lightning round.
First, for the capelet, I cut a very random shape out of some leftover organza and burned all of the edges with fire because I couldn't be bothered finishing it properly, and vampires appreciate a rustic look. I attached it to the cowl piece by hot gluing a little velcro on each of the pieces because I love options and sometimes I might not want a crusty capelet on the back. Next, it was time to prepare some soup for our gemstones, so I mixed up some UV resin with a little blood red lacquer paint and some red glitter and poured that into some gemstone silicone molds, and because I could not be bothered holding my little flashlight onto these, I delegated that task to the sun and repeated that step about 20 times off camera. This resulted in the perfect little army of bloody gemstones. I also needed some matching blood droplet strings of beads, which is a step that takes me several hours, so here's a couple of the finished sets. They're just beaded onto some fishing line, and I glued them in a couple of different places on the cowl and draping off of the hip armor. Adding chains is the most frustrating step of finishing all of this up because the jump rings I had are so tiny and useless.
They also kept breaking whenever I was trying to film the reveal.
But I strung draping chains off of the arm cuff pieces and most of the hip pieces and attached the hip pieces with a large chain that fastens around my waist. And the final step on this day of tedious processes was to glue on my army of gemstones. And I did this in a pretty random way, mostly trying to hide parts of the center that I still didn't like. And to match some of the beading, I also added some accent pearls on different focal points on most of the armor pieces. And with the last of that very sophisticated hot gluing, this corset set is finally done, and for lack of having anything else interesting to say, it is time for the reveal. Hello there. Thank you all so much for watching till the end. I always appreciate that. I had a great time working on this week, and I do feel like I leveled up my skills at least a little bit. But once again, I appreciate you watching. I hope you had a good time coming along on this journey with me, even though it was a little scary sometimes. If you are down for more seasonal content, I will be posting regular updates of my big Halloween project on my Patreon. I have already started working on it. You can subscribe to my Patreon for as low as $1 a month. And of course, as always, the biggest thank you for these videos, and especially the biggest thank you for me being able to afford the materials for these videos, goes to my patrons and especially my executive producers. Liana, Armlar Jean, Anubix, Breeza, Elizabeth Smith, Bean the Bread, I Hang Out with Cats at Parties, Bobo McFo, Freya Wolf, Gravity Drop, Sweet Winter Garden, Katie, Hypnos, India Gloom, Enozine, Megan Penland, Meeks Hunter, Eloquent Silence, Lovisa, Thea Maia, Agent.sketchy, The Cat's Bark, Alwyn Hayes, Shay Lee, Zyle S, Dodo, Cat, Small_Creeper, Francesca Sliwa, Freedom and Gus Gus, Sama Lama Ding Dong, Rose Koffrick, Rose Jacani, Phoenix, Brian, The Cat Buses Early, and Miss Wicked.
You look very happy sitting on your extension cord. Good girl.